All right, good morning everyone. Good morning Queensland. Well, as everyone knows, there is some heavy rain around the southeast at the moment, and the Bureau was originally predicting that it would be moving on in the next 24 hours, but it'll probably take another 24 hours. So we really need everyone out there to be listening to what the Bureau has to say, and also with your local disaster management areas, so your local city councils in your particular areas will be giving you updates as well. This rain is causing a lot of inundation, especially in our catchment areas. So if you live around the catchment areas, please be prepared and be listening to what the Bureau and the emergency alerts say. But this rainfall is not like we saw in the previous event. This rainfall is actually a bit more sporadic and it's not as heavy. But we are still seeing some cases of flooding and the rivers rising in some particular areas. So in Laidley at the moment and Gatton, we actually saw some flooding there, and we're keeping a very close eye on that. And around 300 properties in Laidley have had some water across their properties. We've got about 8 evacuation centres that are opening, and there have been some flood warnings across the state, including for the Condamine, Logan, Bremer Rivers, Worrell, Laidley and the Lockyer Creeks. The Ipswich Mayor has also informed me that there is some flooding in Rosewood, Grandchester and Mount Walker. We are not expecting the Brisbane River to reach beyond minor flood level, which is good at this stage. And, excuse me, it's okay, I've just got sinus. I've had 3 negative rat tests, so everything's fine there. But we are very concerned at the moment about just monitoring those rivers, especially the ones which I said were major flood warnings, which is the Condamine, the Logan, the Bremer and the Worrell and the Laidley, so please keep an eye on that. The SES have had 150 calls for help. There have been Swiftwater teams have performed 9 rescues, and we're asking people, where possible, if you don't need to be out and about on the roads in the southeast today, please don't travel unless you absolutely must. And please remember, if it's flooded, forget it. Now, I do understand that some people would be anxious during this time, but please don't be anxious. The key thing is to be listening to the alerts, and we'll be keeping everybody updated as much as possible. So I'll hand over to the Bureau. The Bureau will give you a comprehensive overview. Then we've got the Acting Commissioner and the Emergency Services Minister here as well. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Premier. Good morning. So the main message from the Bureau of Meteorology today is that this is very much an evolving situation, and we really want people to be across all of the warnings and all of the forecasts specific for their area. So rain areas are continuing across the southeast and the central coast today. And now there are indications, as the Premier said, that this event might linger longer. So initially, the predictions were that today we would start to see that easing trend. But as I said, this is an evolving situation, so that rainfall is likely to stay around today and into tomorrow. And tomorrow is now when we're going to start seeing that clearing trend. So what we're seeing today and tomorrow, until we start seeing it clearing, is widespread areas of rain. And some of those areas could have pockets of very intense rainfall, and that's where we have issued our severe weather warning for today. So areas within that severe weather warning are at risk of seeing more intense rainfall within the widespread band, and that's where we can start to see flash flooding, and that's when the situation can become potentially life-threatening. So a very serious situation where we are seeing more intense rainfall. Along with that severe weather warning, we've also warned today for local landslides as well with that heavier rainfall. Moving into the flooding and the riverine flooding, so I'll start with Brisbane. So for Brisbane River, we are expecting to see minor flooding on the high tide. So this morning we saw a peak at 1.7 metres at 7 a.m. this morning, and we are expecting to see similar peaks at that minor level on the high tides over the coming days. So that's again tonight at 8 p.m. and then tomorrow morning. This is different from the previous event in that in the previous event we were forecasting moderate to major flooding in Brisbane. At this stage we are still expecting to see minor flooding in the Brisbane River. However, I keep saying this is an evolving situation, so while the most likely scenario is minor in the Brisbane River, we really want people to be across the warnings and the forecasts and staying up to date throughout today and tomorrow. One thing to note with Brisbane is that while we have minor flood levels in the river, it's the creeks as well around the Brisbane area that are responding very rapidly to a lot less rainfall. So we don't need to see a lot of rainfall to see rises in the creeks, and where we do see those intense pockets of rainfall, that's when we can start to see flash flooding. So residents in areas that are near to creeks and saw creek rises in the last event, we're really urging to be across things today. We have numerous other flood warnings current. I can go through them very briefly. So we have 5 major warnings, 6 moderate and 3 minor current for the Brisbane area. So the Condamine River, we have Warwick reaching major levels this afternoon. We also have major levels at the Logan River and at Bow Desert. We have the Bremer River and the Worrell Creek both at major levels, so Ipswich is expected to reach moderate this morning and then 11 metres by this evening, and that could be higher with more rainfall. So again, an evolving situation, and depending where those pockets of more intense rainfall fall, that's where we could see an increase in the riverine rising. We also have major at Lockyer and Laidley Creek, so the townships of Gatton, Laidley and Grantham all seeing increased riverine rises there. And then we have minors at Gundawindi and Inglewood on the border rivers, and moderate levels at Gympie on the Mary River. Downstream on the Mary River, Tyro and Maryborough, we don't have predictions there yet. We will see what the rainfall does and see what happens at Gympie as well. So that is the update. So I guess just to reinforce, really wanting people to be across all of those warnings today and all of the forecasts as well. So that's via the Bureau app on your phone or also on the Bureau website. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier. Good morning. A weather event like this is extremely challenging for everybody in our community and also for our emergency services. Our police, our emergency services and all our partner agencies are working around the clock to make sure that we keep our community safe, as we've seen overnight in the Lockyer Valley and Laidley, and continue to do in that space. It's a reminder for all of our community, as the Premier said, to stay connected during this event, particularly if you are in potentially impacted areas. Take action at the right time, listen to the warnings and take action at the right time. We've seen emergency alerts already issued right across the areas that are being impacted. In particular, we've seen that in the entire Lockyer Valley region overnight. Can I also say that our whole disaster management system is working as it should. All those areas that Laura just briefed you on, our local arrangements are in place, our district arrangements are in place, and the state is being briefed on what's happening in that. So we are very much on the front foot to make sure that we can keep our community safe. Can I also emphasise for all Queenslanders, all areas that are being impacted by this weather, this is a time to take care on our roads. Too often we're seeing people still losing their lives or being put at risk because of choices they make in entering flooded waters. The message remains really strong, and we have to keep saying it, and we need our community to listen to this, that if it's flooded, forget it. We have lost far too many lives on our roads this year and in previous events. And on that, just remember that each time someone makes a poor choice and they end up in flooded water, not only do they put themselves at risk and the impact for their families that have to deal with what might happen, it puts our emergency services responders at risk as well. So please, please be across that. Also, you can expect to see road closures across a number of areas in Queensland. So before you travel, firstly, make the decision about whether you absolutely need to travel. Secondly, is it safe to do so? But also check whether you can get through where you need to do. We do not want to lose any more people. Thank you.
So all Queenslanders would appreciate this is a very unusual time of the year to have a severe weather event of this nature. But just because it's an unusual time of the year doesn't mean that our emergency services are any less prepared. In fact, I want to reassure Queenslanders that our emergency services, our police and their partner agencies and local councils are very well prepared, and they're well advanced in supporting communities that are already being impacted by this weather event. And our emergency services and our police and partner agencies will continue to be there for people in need. I wanted to pick up on a point that the Premier made earlier, and that is there will be some people in our community who are very anxious about this event. They may have been people who were impacted by the flooding event that happened only a few months ago. Can I ask all Queenslanders that if you know anyone who has been impacted by flooding recently, just to reach out to them, send them a text message, give them a call and reassure them that all Queenslanders are with them and thinking of them at this time. This is not a time to be anxious. This is a time to be reassured that the state government and local councils are well prepared for this event and that we'll be there supporting you as you recover and get through this event.
Thank you, Premier. Queensland Fire and Emergency Services has continued to work throughout the week with respect to the weather pattern that is started obviously in the north and now in the south-east and south-west components. So, as we've heard, a lot of information is available. We've had 21 emergency alerts just in recent times. They're obviously very much focused in terms of the local impact areas. Most of those are really giving communities the preparedness message to say that there is rainfall, there are local rises in river systems and creeks, and to be prepared. And if you live in those areas or working or travelling through those areas, to be prepared and avoid those areas if you can. That's in addition to a whole lot of other information. So I really want to emphasise the availability of information that is there, whether it's on social media, through your local council, the formal warnings on the QFES website, the Bureau of Meteorology in particular with the current weather pattern, and obviously just checking into your local surrounds. And as has already been emphasised by the Premier and the Minister with respect to checking in on each other, that's essential for us. We've already had 150 SES tasks or requests for assistance in the last 24 hours, and we expect that to rise. And we've had 9 swift water rescue incidents. Unfortunately, a number of those are preventable incidents, and we want to make sure that the message around not travelling through floodwaters, particularly in those areas, as we heard from Laura and the Bureau, in terms of low-lying creek areas or creeks where we get the immediate rainfall, there's an immediate rise in the local water, and that's where we're finding that we're having the incidents where we're having to rescue people that haven't had the situational awareness or haven't made the decision to turn around. And that's, again, the emphasis. We want to avoid that, particularly today and into tomorrow whilst we've got this rainfall event. We're really well postured. We've got a number of pre-deployed crews in areas of Toowoomba, Warwick, Boona, Laidley, Gatton, Sunshine Coast, Bundaberg and Gympie. And as you've already heard from the Bureau, they're some of the areas that are currently on our watch list. And they're the areas that we ask the community also be prepared as we are. Thank you.
Any questions? Premier, how are you expecting this rain event to get? What's the risk?
Yeah, not as severe as last time, so I want everyone to be reassured of that. We are not expecting to see that extent of damage that we saw last time. But as it's an evolving situation, we are asking people to be prepared and to be alert.
You're saying you don't want people to be anxious. Can you explain what that minor flood peaks mean, and also what suburbs are the ones that I guess are most at risk at the moment?
Well, you'll be getting further information probably from your local councils, but if you were impacted by creeks or catchment areas last time, you should be monitoring things closely and listening to your local councils.
So people in Brisbane and Ipswich in those low-lying areas, should they start preparing?
Yeah, I might get the Bureau to address that, but we're not expecting to see the higher amounts of Brisbane River rises, but depending on where the rain falls, that could impact on the different catchments.
And what impact are the dam releases having?
Yeah, sure. That's a very good question. So I can advise, and I think SEQ will put more information out, but this is what I was just advised at our recent meeting, that storages across the SEQ grid have gone from 89% to 94.7. Wivenhoe is at 110.5. In February, it was 185%, so there's still plenty of flood storage that's available. And as I said, SEQ Water can provide further information. and they're actually they've been having some controlled releases, and they're actually going to stop that over the next short period of time when we see those major river rises. Yeah.
And in terms of flood texts and warnings, can you assure that everyone who needs to will receive those text messages?
I might get the Minister to address that because he's more across from his agency about how those alerts go out. But there was a bit of a difference with how Brisbane sends theirs out compared to other councils. Are you able to address that, please? Thanks. And then Laura will address that.
So the system which is administered by the state on behalf of the national government, the national system, is one which is requested by local councils for broadcast messages to be sent out. It's actually quite a sophisticated system. It's able to, target particular areas, particular suburbs. So councils and the local disaster management groups, where they require messages to be sent out, request that through the State Disaster Centre, and already that is happening, and it is a broadcast message. So it's a broadcast message to the target area. There are some councils that, in addition to that national system administered by the state, have their own opt-in or voluntary system. Brisbane City Council is one of those councils. So in addition to the state-based system, they can also send out a voluntary message, a voluntary enrolled message, and some councils are doing that right now. But that's just one way to get the information out. Most councils, in addition to Queensland Fire and Emergency Services and the Bureau of Meteorology, also disseminate information on social media. So people should be monitoring their social media and those key providers of information, as well as also, media outlets, radio, TV and the newspaper.
The council review of approval of QFES, there being some delay in approving the message to be sent out. Was that criticism valid, and will we see that happen here?
Yeah, look, I had something to say in Parliament about that, and obviously the Inspector General of Emergency Management, which is recognised from the Royal Commission as being the gold standard, is doing a broader inquiry which will look at this particular issue. Certainly in the review that came out from Brisbane City Council, which is obviously Brisbane City Council's perspective, there were some inconsistencies in timelines in the report itself, as well as also in the information held by state government agencies. So we'll leave it for the Inspector General of Emergency Management to have a look at that. But can I assure all Queenslanders that the state-based broadcast system works well? It's a national system administered by the state. Where councils request the messages to be sent out, they're processed and sent out in a timely way.
It was said for roads over the next 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, well, we've heard from the Acting Commissioner that unless you need to be out and about on the roads, if you can avoid, that run down to Bunnings today or, that little errand that you can wait a couple of days to do, then you probably should be doing that. The concern that we've got at the moment, obviously, is that there is the possibility of heavy to intense rainfalls in very short periods in areas which, will have saturated water catchments, which could contribute to flash flooding. So people could be caught unawares. So if you can avoid being on the roads, then you should. But certainly it's up to people to make their own decisions based on their local conditions.
So just to clarify some info on, impacts levels around Brisbane.
Yeah, just whether people in, say, like Brisbane, Ipswich and low-lying areas need to start preparing and mobilising to move potentially.
Yeah, so in terms of actions, I'll leave specifically that to emergency services. But in terms of what this weather will bring, so for Brisbane in particular, this morning we saw the peak at 1.67, so that's just below minor, and we are expecting to see minor levels over the coming days. So I guess to put that into context, in the last event we saw major, so that was 3.5, so quite higher than what we saw last time. And then this morning around that minor level, so 1.7 is our minor level. That's what we saw on the high tide this morning. So if that helps people have a reference point of what does this actually mean? This morning's high tide is a good reference point for that minor level, and earlier this season when we saw the major, a good reference point for what a 3.6 metres could be. And I guess in terms of that updating, that evolving situation. We are issuing those flood warnings every 6 hours, so please just keep up to date with them. They detail updated peaks as we get in additional rainfall or upstream flow. So that would be the main advice. If you keep looking at those warnings, you can see that level, and then you can make the decisions based on where your house is in comparison to those levels. And if we do see a changing situation, we'll update those warnings more than every 6 hours. So we'll update those as needed. And then in terms of the creeks and the creeks, not the river, the creeks, that is a different situation because creeks can respond very rapidly, and that really is a very individual situation. So depending on how high houses and residents are, how close they are to the creeks. So in terms of making those decisions, again, it would be keeping an eye on all of our warnings and on the radar and doing that assessment and then following advice of emergency services.
You said that rain is expected to clear in the next 48 hours, but should residents be prepared for more rain next week? What's the more long-term forecast?
Yeah, so once this rain does clear, we can expect still to see some showers about. So on Sunday, similar to this overcast with showery activity, and then into next week as well. So definitely not as widespread and continuous as what we've seen, much more patchy with those more showery activity is what we can expect after this event.
All good? Thank you very much.
Thank you.